Hello friends, I'm Tina from TiinasDiary and you have joined me on a 4-part workshop for Strathmore all about gouache landscapes inspired by our seasons. Today, with the last lesson, we are jumping into a snowy winter. In this lesson, we will be painting dreamy, snowy trees with a warm sunset. Like in all of our 4 classes, we'll be using the Strathmore 500 series ready-cut hot press watercolor paper. The size of the paper is 5 by 7 inches, but feel free to make this painting in any scale you want. I'm using the Princeton Velvetouch brushes, and you can use whatever brushes you feel comfortable with, but here are the brushes I used for this painting. I'm using gouache tubes from Maimeri, and the exact shades I used are black, titanium white, lemon yellow, yellow ochre, scarlet, sky blue, and ultramarine deep. Along with these supplies, I also used washi tape, paper towel, of course water for my paints, and a palette for mixing my colors. Since this is already the 4th lesson, you know the drill. We are starting with washi tape, sketch, and an underpainting. In this painting, we have 2 big trees, and I started my sketching process by sketching them on top of the snow. To this painting, we're going to be making a gradient in the back, so these sketches will be covered with paint, but like I said in my first lesson, sometimes it still helps to make the sketch so you can get used to your painting topic, the placement, and shapes, so when you finally start painting them, you already have some sort of idea of what these trees look like and how the branches are layered on top of each other. Truthfully, I probably would do an even simpler sketch if I was only painting by myself, but I wanted to show you this detail anyway, since I think this step could be really beneficial, especially for beginners who aren't very used to painting specific subjects yet. Next, I'm making an underpainting layer with a very watered down gouache mixture of yellow ochre and scarlet. Even though my painting has lots of blue tones, I still wanted to make a warm yellow underpainting to match the tone of warm light in my painting. I added colors to my palette and started mixing the color for my sky. I started with the top of the sky with white, ultramarine deep, and black to create this slightly muted light blue color to add to the paper with a white wash brush. We're making a gradient from light blue to warm yellow, and to avoid those 2 colors mixing and having green tones in my sky, I'm making the gradient from blue to white to yellow. Again, I'm blending the colors in small sections, so I'm adding more white with every layer, focusing on smaller areas that are pretty much the width of my brush. After I mixed the blue and white, I started doing the same process with the warm yellow section, slowly adding more yellow and scarlet to the white paint, dragging the colors down to eventually have this very orangey, warm layer of paint on top of the line I had drawn for the ground. That being said, I struggled with the colors a bit and had to paint the blue section again a few times to get the value and tone I liked. But it's normal to not get everything perfect on the first try. I also sometimes feel pressured to always succeed immediately, but even as a teacher for a workshop, I have to sometimes fix my own mistakes and redo parts I don't like. The beauty of gouache is being able to start over as well. When I was happy with the sky after making the top a bit more vibrant, I mixed the color for the snow using white, Ultramarine Deep, and Scarlet to create this vibrant color with a more purple-like hue that I added to the bottom of the snow section, making it lighter in the top by blending it again with white. When I'm working on elements like these that don't have to be perfectly blended, you can see my brush strokes are very relaxed and I'm just going back and forth, just gently mixing and blending colors together. I love working on gradients like these where it really doesn't matter if it's perfect or not. So this was just a slightly different process from that kind of more perfectly blended section in the sky, even though it's definitely not perfect. I wanted the bottom to be even darker, so I mixed a darker tone, adding in more black, Ultramarine Deep, and Scarlet. I loosely blended it to the surrounding lighter colors using a smaller brush, size 8 Filbert. After I had the base colors all added and my whole painting area covered in color, I started with the snowy trees. I'm starting by first painting the dark tree silhouette itself with black, scarlet, and yellow ochre. I have painted snowy trees for years, and for a long time I painted them with a very light tone for the snow first, then adding the darker shadows underneath the snow after. Obviously, there are multiple ways to approach any painting subject, but I've noticed the best way to create somewhat realistic trees with snow on top is to paint the trees themselves first with a dark brown color, adding light on the dark branches and only then adding the lighter colored snow on top. This way you can get to know the shape of the tree a bit better and you can add the snow in the right natural spots on top of the branches. It's also much easier to do it this way instead of starting to carve out those darker shadows on top of the snow. This just makes a lot more sense, but I also understand why I have personally done it the other way around after just looking at reference photos of actual trees. I'm using the size 6 round brush to create the two tree trunks first and then starting to add these messy branches on the sides using the tip of my brush. Again, we are adding the snow on top later, so don't worry if your trees don't look perfect. Snowy trees are very forgiving, so keep going if it looks a little bit weird. If you have never painted trees before, you could also look at reference photos of actual trees. Take a little extra piece of paper and just practice the shapes a bit before starting this step if you're feeling a little bit nervous. Looking at real life references of plants and trees is always super helpful when you're turning them into paintings. But like with the pine trees in my first lesson, we are focusing on creating almost a long triangle shape with our trees, but this time I'm making them a bit wider from the bottom. Once the general silhouette is done, I'm starting to add some warm tones on the top of the dark trees, especially to the edges to add in some warmth from the sun. This is actually an important step to make this painting and the trees slowly glow in the sunset sunlight. For this warmer brown, I'm mixing in some scarlet and yellow ochre to the previous color. Again, with this color, I'm lightening the branches on the trees, making the edges of the silhouettes touching the orange of the sky warmer in tone. I'm adding more white, scarlet, and lemon yellow to the previous color to again add to the edges of the silhouette, focusing on even smaller area next to the warm yellow in the sky. And after this, I'm still doing the process once more with adding lighter tones to the edges of the branches before we can start adding the snow on top. I also went in with the darker black and darkened just a few spots within the trees that I think looked a little bit too light in tone. And then we can finally start focusing on adding the snow and really bringing this painting to life. I mixed in white, Ultramarine Deep, Scarlet, and Sky Blue to create this purple blue for the snow on top of the trees. I'm adding it with my size 6 round brush, creating these rounded asymmetrical blobs on top of the branches of my trees. Obviously, it's easier to find good placements for the snow on the branches on the sides, but since the middle of the silhouette shaped trees are just black without any distinct branch shapes, we have to improvise a bit more. For the branches on the sides, I added some more droopy blobs of snow as well to make it look a little bit heavier. As you can see, I'm adding these more circular blobs of snow as well as thinner vertical spots of snow, really trying to make sure it looks somewhat natural and organic. The shapes look a bit harsh now without any shadows, but we will soften the look a little bit later to make it look more realistic. I think it's always important to remember to make snow vibrant and maybe even a bit dark instead of just white or gray to make the scenery look more alive. Adding white or gray snow would look unnatural, out of place, and dull, but creating a darker and colorful purple snow on top ties the trees into the surrounding nature and will just match with the warm evening sun and orange tones better. While I'm adding these random blobs of snow on top of the tree silhouette, I'm making sure we still have some of that darker tone and especially that warmer red showing underneath the snow to create depth and a more dimensional look to the painting. The red spots we added might look a bit strange just on top of the dark trees, but it starts to make sense after we add the snow, as you can see. After I had added the initial snow blobs for both trees, I mixed in a bit more sky blue and white to the snow color and started adding some little highlights on top of some of the snow with the tip of my brush. Next, I'm taking the size 2 long round brush and mixing white, yellow ochre, lemon yellow, and scarlet to do my favorite part of the whole painting process, adding a little warm yellow highlight to the branches. I'm adding this color pretty sparingly, adding it to multiple spots but with thinner lines and smaller details. I'm mostly adding it underneath the snow blobs, especially on the edges of the trees closer to the sky. Then with the same brush, I took some darker blue color and started to add shadows to the piles of snow, blending the edges a bit and shading some of the blobs that were behind others to again further create depth and dimension and to make the whole painting look more realistic. Since the ground was so simple, I took some slightly darker blue and added little spots to the ground, making them almost look like little footsteps or paw prints on the snow. After adding some more highlights to the snow on the trees, I also added a little shadow to the bottom of those footprints on the snow so they would look a little bit deeper. For some reason, I felt like this painting also needed a moon in the sky, so I took some white paint and painted a circular moon on the right above the trees. I also then painted some highlights on top of the snow on the trees with a white paint, almost like highlights reflecting the moonlight. With the same white, I also added some lighter color on top of the snow on the ground and some gray purple extra details and texture to make the ground look slightly more interesting. But with that, we are now coming to the end of this painting process and my gouache landscape workshop with Strathmore. A huge thank you goes to all of you who joined me on this workshop. I really hope that you enjoyed these videos and learned something new with me. Also, thank you Strathmore for inviting me to host this workshop. I had a lot of fun painting these seasonal landscapes and creating these classes for all of you. If you want to see more of my art, you can find me on most social media platforms with the name TiinasDiary. Thank you for joining me. Have a lovely rest of your year. Bye bye.